Okay, good evening, everyone. I see 5:30 on my clock, so we will get started here. I'll call this meeting of the Budget Committee to order. Ms. Perry, you call the roll, please.
Deacon.
Here.
Fitzwater.
Present.
Hensley.
Present.
Kimna.
Here.
Lester.
Here.
Schreiber. Spencer.
Here.
Spicer.
Present.
Ward.
Here.
Wiseman.
Okay, thank you very much. It sounds like our overhead audio
Sorry.
situation has been resolved,
Sorry.
and then some. So we appreciate that. So we've reached the part of our budget discussions when we are now primarily dealing with committee discussion of the budget. And these meetings are limited to 90 minutes at a time. Sometimes we use the whole 90 minutes. I have also adjourned meetings after 7 to 12 minutes in the past. It's all a matter of how much discussion the committee members bring to the table. There's no right amount. This is sometimes a longer process than others, and sometimes it takes a little bit longer to digest information and produce some solutions than it does at other times. So that being said, we'll get into committee discussion of the budget right now. And as we do that, Ms. Perry, I'm aware that you might have some comments about items that were presented in the Parks Department budget last time.
So we have one item that is listed in the Parks Department budget that has a typo on it that we would like to make a modification on the parking lot to start off. I have spoken to the Parks Department and they are aware of this change. The account is in the golf course and it is the training and education account. If you make reference to that account, it was adopted in '22 at $7,500 and the amount listed currently in the budget is $75,000. So we'd like to correct that and reduce the expenses in that particular training and education account by $67,500, and ultimately that would end up raising, or it would reduce the revenue that's coming out of the fund balance as well.
So it would be returning
Money to the fund balance because their overall budget in parks does reflect usage of the fund balance.
And when we say the fund balance, we're talking about just the parks fund
The
balance.
parks fund balance,
Okay.
correct.
Well, to kick things, Mr. Spalding or anybody else from Parks, you all have any comments or anything to add to that?
Nope.
Okay, then I would make the motion to reduce the $75,000 in the training and education line under the golf tab in the Parks Department budget from $75,000 to $7,500, with the remaining amount returned to the Parks fund balance. Okay, yeah, and this is just sort of a cleanup, housekeeping item. It is also serving as a handy example of how the parking lot function works. So any comments or questions or anything on this particular motion? Not every time that something goes up on the parking lot does it have to be voted on that night. This one, it doesn't seem to be very controversial, so I don't know why we wouldn't. But if the proposer would like to leave an item on the parking lot until the next meeting for whatever reason, we can also do that, just for everyone's information. But if there's no other conversation on this point, we have a motion and a second and no discussion. Ms. Perry, would you call the roll, please?
Fitzwater.
Aye.
Hensley.
Aye.
Kimna.
Aye.
Lester.
Aye.
Schreiber. Spencer.
Aye.
Spicer.
Aye.
Ward.
Aye.
Wiseman.
Aye.
I'm sorry, Deacon.
Aye.
I'm not the city clerk, obviously. Motion
Having-
passes.
Great, thank you. So that will be reflected in revisions to the current budget. So now I will open it up for general discussion of the committee. whether or not you have proposals. You know, you don't have to come with a new spending item and an offset necessarily to speak tonight, but any topic of conversation related to the budget certainly is welcome. Councilwoman Wiseman.
Yes, thank you. So these microphones are very different. I can hear myself. Okay. So there is a streets item on the pink sheet, which is the street sweeper that I'd like to fund with sales tax G, part of that gleaning. And I want to make very clear that the reason that I'm doing this is because also what I would like to do and what I'm going to propose that we do for the September 6th meeting is fund some sort of, I'm going to get this wrong, and I talked about this earlier today, whatever it's called, whatever sales tax G is that we can fund, basically reimbursing ourselves for fiscal year 2022. And so I think that if we can do that through public works, then we can also, so we can get our fund balance back up to 17%, because it looks like we have almost $300,000 here that we're short. And I would guess that we have 300,000. He's not here this evening, Mr. Marash, but I would guess that we have $300,000 worth of projects that we can reimburse ourselves with. So I'd like to work with Mr. Councilman Fitzwater and find some of those projects to reimburse ourselves with. But in exchange, what I'd like to do is go ahead and add that second street sweeper and fund that with sales tax G, that gleaning that we have.
Okay, we have a motion to add the street sweeper for, where is it? For Public Works, the 542 streets, is what I'm seeing in the budget document here. And to take the funds from the $2.6 million remaining in the estimated sales tax G gleaning amount.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and at least 1 second. Would you like this to be voted on this evening?
I'm okay if we wait on this. I don't necessarily need to do this right now unless the council would like to discuss and take a vote tonight. That is the council's pleasure. But what I'd really like to do is work with Councilman Fitzwater and figure out some projects with sales tax G. I just thought that those were two good set-offs, and I thought they would be a great conversation to have tonight in the event that somebody thought of something better to get us back up to the 17% or different that still might be better. And that way we can keep marching forward with our general fund percentage.
Okay, so we will let that set on the parking lot until next meeting.
I swear it's not me.
Is it?
We're struggling a little bit with the keyboard,
Is
so I promise we'll get these on the parking lot.
I promise.
Has it taken over control?
Yes.
It's a bit possessed.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting. Usually we don't have that level of entertainment here. This
Yeah.
is pretty good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just gonna mention, he'll be here.
Well, very good. So whether you'd like to have that discussion now with Mr. Marash or confer offline and come back, it's totally up to you. But
Well, I would like any other council input there is before I just go bombard Mr. Marash and say, hey, hook me up with projects.
Matt, that's what happens when you're 10 minutes late to one of these meetings.
We start talking about you and you get voluntold to do things.
That's right. Any other, is there any council discussion on this proposal or on the use of sales tax G gleaning funds generally? I mean, my guess is that this will not be the last time and that we make use of those funds during this process. So, any other discussion? Councilman Lester.
Yeah, I talked with Mark Schreiber about a couple of things with the body worn cameras and in car cameras, and wanted to put up a couple of things related to that. One, I think it's important to do the whole system and have the staff that's needed to monitor that and keep track of it and make sure it works right. And so I would like to propose that the police sergeant needed for that coordination, that $100,306 be on there from the safety tax.
So permanently funded out of the public safety tax?
Yes, that, that position. And then kind of related, for the body worn cameras and car cameras, would propose like the $500 out of sales tax G gleanings.
500,000?
500,000, yes. And I know that's a little more than, I think the difference from that and the grant was 455,000, but just to give a little cushion maybe.
Okay, so we have,
And yeah, like I said, I discussed this with Mark Schreiber, and he's supportive of both those.
okay. So I'm sure you all, how are we doing? No, okay.
Good, I think.
So we have a proposal, first to apply $500,000 from the sales tax G gleaning towards body worn cameras, and then also to fund the police department sergeant position regarding the camera management out of the public safety tax fund.
Can I ask
as
for
a
that
permanent
dollar
item.
amount one more time? For
Which-
the police sergeant?
That's, Mr. Crowell, did you have any comments? It looked like you might have a comment on the police sergeant item. Or not, I don't know.
I was just going to ask Sheila, that's public safety, correct?
She's still trying to work on the street sweeper
Okay.
for sales tax G. So what has been proposed is $500,000 out of sales tax G for the body cameras. I want to, I guess, clarify, does that mean it would remove the $500,000 from the public safety tax?
Yeah, that's intention, yes.
And then the sergeant gets added to public safety, is that?
Correct.
Okay, and just, that will have some impact, obviously, on the amount of funds available in public safety for, okay.
But there would be about a net
I
$400,000
get, yeah.
relief, I guess, on the public safety tax fund. Councilman Spencer?
Yeah, this is for Police Chief Willie. Is that is an additional staff position rank of sergeant, or is that already in your department and it's just not filled?
That would be an additional position.
Additional position?
FTE, yeah.
Okay. My concern is that we're still in negotiations with the firefighters, and there's still, we don't know what that number is, so we keep spending money out of that account, and they're still in negotiations. I think it's kind of hurts the cities and their efforts to do that. I'm not opposed to it. I'm just saying that we might want to pump the brakes on any more dollars coming out of public safety tax until.
But this would be a net increase in public safety tax available.
Of 400,000, correct?
Yeah.
I'm think.
Yeah, there's a lot to digest there. Mr. Molman, is there a specific way we should be discussing the potential allocation of these funds for the purpose of the body worn cams, given the status of the grant application?
Yeah, the previous guidance I think is still good, is that we should be thinking about it and classifying it as grant match funds, and try to avoid of budgeting the full amount. Essentially anticipating that we're budgeting a grant match to pay for the body cameras.
Thank you. Councilwoman Wiseman?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to piggyback off of Councilman Spencer. I just wanted to caution the council that I think that because of the matching issue, I don't mind earmarking, but I don't want to, set out all of the sales tax G to something different. And I also don't want to change the public safety tax too much right now. I think we have a lot in limbo there. And so I guess I'd like to see a little bit more where we go with those body cams and what kind of grants we could get before I don't mind pursuing the sales tax G's portion of it, but I would like to see more before we promise anything from either side, I guess is what I'm saying. So I'd like to caution a vote maybe on that particular thing right now.
Councilman Lester?
So does allocating our sales tax G for body cameras as a matching, does that cause a problem?
No, that it relieves a problem. Yeah, we don't want to get into a situation where we've previously budgeted the entire project amount for the body cameras and then receive a grant and then reduce that budget amount. That's supplanting, which is not allowed under the most grant programs, and including the one that we're specifically looking at for the body camera grant.
Councilman Fitzwater?
I got a series of questions, but first, the $500,000 then is coming from sales tax G going into the public safety fund? Is that?
That's not my understanding. My understanding would be that it would be paid directly out of sales tax G. Is that right?
Yes.
To pay for the body cams? And when we went through the ARPA discussion, what was the planned goal to pay for the body cams? Was it to come out of the public safety tax?
I think that's been my understanding of the goal, or of one potential use of it.
My questions then relate to the sales tax G dollars. Were they in the first pass of the budget that we received, the budget letter that we received from the mayor?
No.
And then these funds just became available when we did a second round of looking at the budget?
No, sir, they've always been available, but the mayor chose at that point to utilize some of those gleaning funds in her budget as opposed to waiting until the process that we would normally go through outside of budget.
And the money that is left over in there, is that we collected more sales tax than what we anticipated?
Yes.
So all of that 3.9 million is additional revenue?
Additional revenue through tax collections and additional revenue through interest income, and the 3.9 is an estimate at this point.
And we've completed all of the projects that we talked to people back about
We
5
have-
years ago?
We have not completed the projects, but the funds that were allocated for those projects are still set aside if they were unspent. So anything that was previously committed to projects is still committed to those projects and is still in the budget authority for those projects.
So does that mean it's in the 3.9 million or already been taken out?
No, it's taken out. The 3.9 is the estimation of the number you have to work with.
When I look at the,
I think it's on the top, Steve.
I just wanted to say that even though that money is still available for those projects, if for some reason the projects come in under budget, then that would have some more money that would go into that gleaning portion of that.
have we had that experience that things have come in under budget?
Yeah, there's some projects that come in under, yeah. I don't know about now with inflation and everything else going on, but.
So we have accounted for those dollars. And now it's just for projects that we had proposed in sales tax H, what is the status of those projects? Do they just set on hold until we build up enough funds to begin the projects?
We originally, as we went into the sales tax, had a cash flow model, and that has determined how we budget over the course of the 5-year iteration for the expenses, taking cash flow into account. But obviously, we start collections in April, or for the April time period. We didn't get them until June. There's a two-month lag there. So if you have someone who immediately goes and spends whatever money they've been allocated in FY22, clearly there's a cash flow issue there.
Is it possible for us to get a chart of how those dollars have been spent in sales tax G?
I do believe I emailed that out. Councilman Kimna had asked for it
Is it
previously.
broken down as to infrastructure,
It was
public safety?
It was broken down specifically by account. So every account that exists in sales tax G was listed to reflect how much has been spent.
But it wasn't total. There was one total. It wasn't totaled by account, was it?
Yes.
So I could go on there and see exactly how much went to public safety, how much went to infrastructure, how much went to the parks, how much went to
You would have to look at the
contingency.
account names to determine that. So for example, parks is the first grouping on the list. There might be 15 or 20 accounts that are for parks. Each one of those accounts is specific to a project or a type of activity, and those are broken down by account. I did not total it by here's how much parks got or here's how much public safety got, but based on the names of the accounts, you should be able to ascertain that, or I'm happy to take that same spreadsheet and break it down.
Are we comfortable that we met the percentage requirements that we indicated to the public that we were going to spend those dollars on, especially with these new dollars that are being proposed? Is Parks getting their 10% and public safety their 20%? And
I don't think we had percentages on this, for this sales tax.
on sales tax G?
I think they were, yeah, I think there were some guides where council approved some specific dollar amounts that may have been based on percentages. But I don't think the percentages were in
I
there.
can show you the brochure.
Okay, well, we can get you that information then.
Well, my concern is we are exploding the size of city government. I mean, all of a sudden now we're adding potentially $4 million. It seems to be a race to how quickly we can spend those dollars. I guess if we're going to spend them, I mean, we had a request for 8 police cars. Why did we only fund 5? Why didn't we put the other 144,000 in there and just check something off the box? There's a request for additional dollars for demolitions. I don't know if that fits in the definition. There's a request for abatement dollars. There's a lot of requests on pink sheets. If we're going to just start spending this down to zero, it seems like we would go through and strategically spend those dollars on what meets the needs of our city, not who can get their microphone on quickest and ask to put something on the parking lot. I mean, there were conscious decisions not to fund some projects. My assumption was that we weren't going to spend our piggy bank down all the way to the last dollar. If that's the case, then, you know, there's other critical issues in this city. But I can tell you, and I'm only speaking for one, but the public is concerned about us. All of a sudden, we've just got money to spend, and we're just laying it on the table. There's no vision. There's no strategy of how we're going to spend it. Police department that we all say that is #1 priority. We funded 5 out of 8 of their requests, and you know there's a request for a sergeant tonight, but there's a lot of other things on that list. Fire department the same way. And if it's just going to be a race to see how quickly we can spend that, how far are we going to take that down? We taking it all the way down to 0? Is that the goal?
With all due respect, that isn't a question for me.
I'm
That's what
asking
you
my
all do.
buddy.
I'm not
I'm
recommending spending
asking my
all.
colleagues. or
I didn't, yeah, I
anybody
think
that
those
wants
are
to
all good
answer.
points. Excellent question, yeah.
I mean, we are exploding the size of our city government. People are
Well-
already concerned, and all they want are roads and bridges, a clean city, a safe city, and things that we can provide.
Yeah.
And some of these projects are,
Yeah, they're all good projects, but yeah,
But-
you all decide, yeah.
I mean, we went from mid-July to struggling and sent the budget back to, it's the roaring 20s, and in August, spending dollars.
First of all, these are sales tax related revenues that came in over and above what was projected and identified projects. So this happens for every sales tax that we've had. I think that's a good thing. Secondly, typically what council has done in the past, doesn't mean it has to be done that way, but as you would adopt the budget and have some of that discussion, but you would typically do that discussion on use of gleaning funds after the budget's been adopted. But yeah, I would think it makes sense to look at the different pink sheets, but there's certainly many other things as well.
My point is, we've got a parking garage study out. Lord only knows when we're going to get it. When we do get it, more than likely, it's going to come back and challenge the dollars we have in our parking fund. There was a proposal to build a $12 to $15 million garage downtown that was sidetracked until we get all of this put together. We've got roads and bridges and infrastructure challenges in this community that the community keeps asking us for. My only plea is that we strategize on how we're going to spend down those dollars before we just start laying things on the table that are going to get approved. We all know they're going to get approved. I mean, who's going to pull back? They're all good things, but do they meet the overall strategy of what this city is asking us to do in 24, 25, 26? I mean, we know the viaduct at some point is going to need a lot of cash. We're still looking at trying to pull together the MSP project. We put some ARPA dollars there. Hopefully it's enough. But I'm just saying it seems like we as a group, and I'm talking about us, and again, I'm only one of 10, we would have some type of a strategy discussion before we just start spending dollars and spend it down, and once they're spent, they're gone. And we've got needs in this community. We're putting dollars into our bus system. I mean, I think we have all conceded that that is a benefit that we need to provide in this community, but is costing us dollars. And there are just needs that are so obvious that we don't even have to look for them, and we're not talking about any of those needs. We're, again, putting money toward great projects, but we're spending past dollars to fill next year's holes, and I don't know how we're going to fill them in 24, 25, and moving into the future. Now, some of them are one time, but, you know, I understand some may not be one time. There may be additional. So I'm just uncomfortable with the direction of this discussion until we, and, you know, if that's the will of the council, then, you know, I guess that's the direction we go, but we have done no strategic discussion on, hey, we lucked out, we got 3.9 million more than what we anticipated. Can we strategically address the needs of this community 5, 10 years from now before we just dissipate all those funds? Last question I'll ask, and then I'll turn the mic over to whoever else wants to talk, is where can I go to find those dollars that are available in sales tax G and documents that are provided to us?
So in the annual financial report, you will see sales tax has a separate column on our financial schedules, and there will be listed there a fund balance amount, just like there is in the general fund. We use that fund balance amount to determine as we move forward how much will roll into the next year. But to come up with the calculations, I have to take the fund balance amount and take out of it anything that is still obligated for sales tax G on those projects that were originally assigned. So is there a document, a single document that provides that to you? Not that you can pull manually. I can provide that.
My point is, and that number is a snapshot of that day. I mean, the next day it could change, may not change.
What should not change is the fact that the funds are either obligated currently, if they're obligated today and spent tomorrow, it's still the same number. If someone has $100,000 allocated to them and they spend 20 tomorrow, the total of the 80 they have left and the 20 they spent today is still $100,000. So while it is a snapshot of that day, it takes into account any additional spending that has already been allocated to a particular project.
But what if there are cost overruns that are not anticipated?
Those are not anticipated.
So the number is a snapshot, hoping that everything goes as budgeted and projected. Is that not accurate?
It is accurate. However, if there was an overrun on a project that they were unable to cover with another budget availability that they have in the sales tax fund, they would have to come back to council for that because council has only allotted so many dollars. So it's not taken into account right now on what you allocate to them. If you give them $5 million, they could go out and do purchase orders for $5 million. So cost overruns would still come back to council for future approval.
Well, I'll take responsibility, Mr. Chairman, for not asking the questions on what that fund balance looked like, but I'll repeat something I said at a prior meeting. We have said, I have said, I'm not going to, that everyone else can speak for themselves. I have said in committee meetings where we turned down projects because we did not have the funding to be able to do them. There are people out there that were not going to be able to pave their streets because the cost went up. We didn't have the dollars to cover it. It would have been nice to have an elbow nudge, hey, wait a minute, did you think about, here's some way that we could fund that project so that we can do what people are asking us to do, pave their streets and keep them safe. And again, we've got needs in the police department that if we're going to spend these dollars, to me it seems like that's a priority of the community that we take a look at that first. So I will get off sales tax G. This is the third time I've talked about it, but I'm just very frustrated that we're spending dollars out of a fund that, again, I'll take responsibility. I knew the fund was there, but I didn't know it was open season on, being able to fund projects and exploding city government. And, we've watched it at the state. Their day of reckoning is coming. And, I hope that we can bridge between where we are and where we're headed and still meet the needs of the community. Thank you.
So just
Councilman Lester?
Just to clarify, you're not referring to what I've proposed as exploding city government. I hope you aren't. I mean, we've talked about this for a long time, the body cameras.
I don't know, you asked me.
But
I am 100% dating back to the summer of 2020 when I raised the issue in support of body cams. I am a little concerned on how we go about as a city at funding it. At the end of the day, we're going to buy body cams. That's what our police department wants. That's what our community wants. I think it's our responsibility. All I'm saying is that it ought to compete with other projects. Is $500,000 enough, or can we look at other? I mean, we're just chipping away at $2.6 million that's left, without even thinking about how does it compete with some of our other needs. We will buy body cams. That's what public safety indicates. The way we do it could be a little bit different. It could be a mix. It could be a blend, but we don't even know what our options are.
And that's why we're here having these meetings. That's what this whole process is about, is having discussions that lead to wise long-term spending actions and planning. So, Councilman Deacon.
I'll have to apologize. I'm new to the process, but I have to echo Councilman Fitzwater. 3.9 million when just on the east end alone, I mean, it bangs you to death almost every road, main roads, not the side street and the subdivisions. But my gosh, West Main Street, parts of McCarty Street now are broken up. That's what I hear, that's the phone calls I get, that's the personal emails I get. When are you gonna fix our roads? I don't see it. We're at the end of the season, nothing's been laid down. I get only so much government talk I can give them why it hasn't happened. I mean, it's out of my, seems like it's out of our control, but then we have the money here and it should be in our control. Yeah, there was a couple million left over, but almost $4 million. That's a lot of money, and all of a sudden they'll be plugging into the budget without thinking, what were the priorities for the capital improvements?
Any other comments on this point? If the Public Works Committee would like to share suggestions for how they think we should best proceed with prioritizing public works projects that are pending but unfunded, at some point before we come back and conclude this process, that might be really helpful. Councilwoman Wiseman?
Yeah, I was gonna ask if we are gonna continue discussions about sales tax G in this process, or if we can conclude the budget discussions if we don't have anything else to talk about, and ask to move that on to council. And I say that I know it's really fast, but that's going to be my next question around 7 o'clock. If we're still talking about sales tax G, and I'm not trying to cut off any discussion about sales tax G because I think it's been wonderful, but I think that's also something, as Mr. Crowell pointed out, typically in the past we have done at council meetings, and I think that we could continue to do at council meetings.
Councilman Spencer?
And I guess that's some of what Councilman Fitzwater is indicating, is that part of the mayor's budget, she is utilizing the gleaning process earlier than what we generally do. So, which, you know, I'm not gonna second guess her list of priorities on those, because those kind of tie into what a capital project would fall under. But it is concerning that we do not have Ms. Marash is well aware, every meeting we come up, there, you know, people come in and having private stormwater issues, saying, city, can you help, can you pay for this and pay for that? And if it was a surprise to you that we had these overages, to me, there's a disconnect of communication somewhere. You know, I got the figures, but I had to go about, you know, doing the math instead of, I don't know why we can't have a simplified document that basically says expenses and revenues on each of these actual years of within the sales tax G, because you know, you have to go back and you have to subtract the revenue from expenses to get to the CI tax G number, but then I mean, it's just not a clear-cut number that we have that says, hey, you know, this is some overage money that you can utilize during those actual years. So, and I guess another concern I have is that it's how did we, a point that's not really being discussed, because it's probably not, we're not able to really get a true definite answer, but how did we get these overages? And one would likely assume that it's just because of the higher inflation, people are buying the same amount of stuff, but they're paying more for it. So then it's kind of a double-edged sword. If we hopefully get the inflation back down to a normal, acceptable rate, then will our sales tax projection revenues not meet expectations or not meet projections.
Ms. Perry?
So the sales tax projections that we have, you're asking about the document that's in your book. This document presents you with budget versus actual. It does not show you what is rolling or the cash flow from one year to the next. That's really what the financial reports are intended to do. by showing you what the fund balance is. We don't talk about the overages as we progress through a 5-year iteration, because I would hate to talk about an overage in year 1 and 2, and then in years 3, 4, and 5, we have underages. So that's also one of the reasons we don't spend funds in advance of the 5-year iteration being finalized, because you don't want to undermine yourself. The projections that we use are reasonable and realistic for what we see as trends. I don't know what inflation is going to do to that. I mean, you would assume that it could have an impact. We don't know that.
Councilwoman Ward.
Okay, so are you saying you don't suggest that we use sales tax G currently in the budget process, that we should wait?
That would not be something that's up to me to make the suggestion on. What I am saying is that we have finalized the 5-year iteration, that everything that has previously been obligated and unspent is still sitting out there for the particular projects they were obligated for.
And they could be higher, they could come in higher.
They could, although that's not taken into account at the time when the original budget is provided either.
Okay.
And the figures that I have of the estimated 3.9%, I can very easily provide you with information on how I got that. It is determinable. That is a good estimate. It's something that simply relates to looking at what the revenues came in at versus what we budgeted for. And I can break that down by each of the 5 years of the iteration plus the interest income and come back to that approximate $3.9 million, which I would be happy to provide.
Okay.
But if I could, it is an estimate. I mean,
Correct.
typically, that's why we would wait. We'd wait till we had a better picture of when the projects were completed and how they were, and wait till that money was actually there, and so then you would have that discussion. Typically, it doesn't mean it has to be that way, but typically you'd wait till we had a better number, but it isn't going to be off by millions of dollars, I wouldn't think.
And I guess that's what I'm saying, is that the mayor used the overages to basically balance the budget. I mean, she did have some cuts,
Well-
like the compost service contract and cutting some JC rep, but nothing else necessarily from within.
And while I added those in there, they don't have to stay. They can all be taken out. Council could take them out. They don't have to be funded. It was simply a suggestion. Those capital items, those items that do fall under what the sales tax could be used for. So that's why I did simply, and merely as a suggestion, knowing that those were items that needed to be, and with the timing, thinking that would be helpful to move forward. And we certainly can wait, and they could be funded after the fact, but they don't have to be. So I wouldn't say that I'm balancing the budget on them necessarily.
So is the 3.9 figure what is left after what the mayor's suggestions has come out? Or?
No. So
So-
3.9 is what we started with, and I think she has approximately 1.2 in her budget. I do want to point out a majority of those items are pink sheet capital items.
Correct.
Therefore, they were not taken out from somewhere else to balance the budget. She strictly funded capital items that otherwise would not have been funded. So again, as Mr. Kroll said, and the mayor, if council chooses to remove those, they could do that and work the entire process as we would or have in past years.
Councilwoman Ward.
I'm fine. I mean, I don't want to speak for everyone else, but I'm fine with the mayor has funded through sales tax G. And piggybacking on what Councilman Fitzwater said regarding safe and clean community. I mean, I feel like that's what our main charge is, serving the citizens. So there are some smaller ticket items that I would like to suggest for sales tax G because I feel they do fit into helping create a more safe and clean community. And also, when you have a safe and clean community, that also helps create a healthy economic community. So I know sales tax G, you know, we have to look at capital projects, we have to look at economic development areas, and I feel that all of these, being that they would help the safety and the look of our community, that they would fit into that. One being, to go ahead.
Can I interrupt? Do we still have on the floor the motion that Councilman Lester made that we need to deal with? We didn't, I don't have record that we got a second on that. Or is that not the process we're going to
I
follow?
can't recall if there was a second or not either. Did you post it?
We do
I'm doing
not,
it on my laptop because it's not.
Okay,
I don't have a second on that.
okay.
I'll second.
Now I'm trying to recall. I don't know. Have we required seconds in years past for proposals to go onto the parking lot?
I don't remember them.
Okay, so I just want to clarify that. So
Yeah, I
if someone's
think-
making that motion, we're going to put it on the
Yeah.
parking lot.
If it were to come up for a vote, I'm not even entirely sure that we usually require a second to vote on items that are on the parking lot. But for purposes here, I think the councilman has made a couple of proposals. I don't sense, perhaps I'm wrong, I don't sense that it's being pushed for a vote this evening.
Okay.
I think it's part of probably what's going to be a longer conversation, but it doesn't seem to me, unless he objects, to be out of order for us to continue the conversation that's
Thank you.
occurring. Thank you.
Okay, the $80,000 demo amount. If you drive through or live in our urban core neighborhoods, you know, we have properties everywhere that need to be addressed, that are dangerous. Also, the $15,000 abatement cost, again, same issue. We struggle with our urban core or historic areas with abatement problems, and I think increasing that will help. The replacement of streetlights to LED to make neighborhoods more feel safer. Also help with crime with having lit up areas. That's $12,000. And then a $4,000 concrete core drill for public works. They said that theirs is now too weak to actually cut a core. A new core will allow them to drill a big enough core that they won't have to replace a whole concrete section. So those are the things I have for G. And I do want to put up on the parking lot, I don't have funding for it yet. I want to put the one open planter back up on the parking lot. And, you know, it was shared with us that in order to apply and get grants, we have to have updated surveys, we have to have updated plans, or else we are not going to qualify for grants that actually helps our budget a lot and helps our community move forward. And that's a planner's job to work all those avenues to make that happen. So I would like to put the open planner position back up, and also our yard waste service contract of 201. I'm not sure what the planner amount was. I looked, and since it wasn't
I can get that.
a pink sheet item, and it wasn't on the letter, mayor's letter. The yard waste service contract, I think it's vital that we keep that for just keeping our community, again, clean. And also not creating a more workload on our fire department with having to respond to fires throughout the year from burning this. I don't know if everyone saw, but later on this afternoon, we received a letter from our Environmental Quality Commission, and they support us continuing this. You know, I think before we just end it, we need to come up with some plan, have in place to do so, if that's how we want to do it in the future. But also, I believe, you know, when we sold the Republic 10-year contract with our citizens who expressed that they wanted curbside pickup for their yard waste, you know, we were able to share with them and offset that with, well, we have a free service already that we contract that you can take your stuff to. So those are the two things I'd like to put up there that I don't have funding for yet, but hope to.
Okay.
somewhere.
And we will end up modifying the parking lot and emailing that out in the morning since we're having some technical difficulties.
Great, thank you. Councilman Spencer?
So, probably no surprise here, but to lead off with it, it was mentioned in last year's budget about the parks admin fee. And that's not something that was put in the budget or even as a highlighted item for discussion. Is there a reason why that's not highlighted again for this year?
To increase the admin fee?
Correct.
Just that it's been talked about before and no action taken, so just an assumption. I think that there was an interest in doing that. I don't even know what that amount is offhand.
Ms. Sheila gave that figure to me this morning that I asked about. It would be about $270,960. And so, to piggyback off Councilman Ward, I agree with her that the waste drop-off the yard waste drop-off is a critical service we provide. And if the parks would want to take that on to an offset of their admin fee, I would definitely be supportive of that, but also with an additional $35,000 for the JC rep, fully fund the contract for them. So what I'm saying is the parks admin fee is $270,960. The compost service contract is $201,600. JC rep contract is $35,000. Still with a net savings or availability, I should say, of dollars is $34,360 left. So I would.
So to clarify, are you proposing then increasing the parks administrative chargeback by the $270,969?
The figure you gave me, yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Councilwoman Ward?
Could you explain how the admin fee works and how that all?
Sure. We take what is budgeted for the administrative departments, city administrator, city attorney, HR, finance, IT, and we allocate those out to the individual departments based on the last audited financial statement. So in this case, it would be FY21, and it's essentially each department's portion of operating expenses versus total operating expenses. So we come up with a percentage, and then we allocate out those administrative departments' budgets based on that percentage. Clearly, the general fund, while we don't collect money, for example, from the police department or the fire department or any of the other general fund departments, we still take that into account when we're calculating the figures so that the other funds don't get hit with a larger percentage than they have coming to them. The difference with parks is that parks' percentage, the figure that would normally be calculated using that methodology is not what parks is charged for an administrative fee. They are charged based on the last 12 months of sales tax collections for the parks fund. Ultimately, that results in a lesser dollar amount than what the percentage calculation for every other department is calculated at.
Sorry, just to follow up on that, Ms. Sheila, probably to Mr. Spalding, and I'm open to whether his department wants to run that, service that himself, or if he wants to continue paying the contract with our service provider we have currently. So I'm leaving that up to the discretion of the Parks Director and his staff.
And we wouldn't necessarily need their answer tonight, right?
Nope.
By all means, no.
Councilman Deacon?
For clarification, if they take over the yard waste, then you'll waive the administration fee as a trade-off?
No, I would waive the difference.
No, I understand.
So, yeah, I'd knock off the 201, basically. But then whatever's left would still be utilized for the J.C. rep and $34,000 additional.
So, Mr. Spalding, if Parks could, I'm sorry, I'm having to look through Mr. Marash's head. If I was catching a corner, I got a bit of a forehead, but if Parks could consider that and follow up with Councilman Spencer and other members of staff if there are any questions, and just, it would be helpful to have Parks' take on that proposal. Thank you. Councilwoman Ward.
And just to confirm, that can't be taken from G in any way, because it's a contract.
Correct.
And sorry to interrupt, so I need to go back to your kind of list. The abatement, I don't think that would be an eligible use, because that's not tied to the to a fixed asset of the city, and in fact, it's not even tied to a fixed asset. It's more services, clearing out trash, mowing grass. Pretty rarely do we actually do repairs as part of an abatement process. So that's a problematic category that I just don't think we could get there with G.
But the demolition, sorry.
I think I'm okay with the demolition. If that's the way the council wants to go, I would want to do the research. I'm most of the way there, but I would have some resources that I want to check into. It's a novel use of the capital improvement sales tax, but I'm not ready to say that it's not allowed. That is definitely expenditure on a fixed asset. It's just the weird thing is it's not a fixed asset owned by the city. But the bare language of the statute doesn't say anything about that. So a little bit more research if that ends up being the way that the council wants to go with that. So definitely no on the abatement. The demolition, I think we're okay.
Councilwoman Ward.
However, if we have properties, say on Monroe Street, that we acquire from landowners, and we need to demolish to make it a two-way, then we could use this
Absolutely.
demo definitely for that, and that would free up our demolition money.
Yes, that is
pot.
unquestionably eligible.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Lester.
Just a question, where does things that we approve through ARPA show up in the budget that we're looking at? Does it show up?
So your budget book was actually prepared before those ARPA items were approved. Therefore, they're not in your list. I have since done the budget amendments for those. So if we were to regenerate a list today, we've created a separate department for those ARPA type expenses. And they are part of the amended budget for FY22.
Could you provide that
Sure.
to us? I thought we'd allocated some from ARPA to demolition, but anyway, there's a number of things that, yeah, if you could do that, I'd appreciate it.
I can provide that.
Mayor Turgeon.
On the compost site discussion, and not to put Todd on the spot, but he may be able to answer that question pretty easily and quickly tonight. I know that I did ask him if that was something that Parks would be able to do on their own, if we could have them do it rather than outsourcing it like we currently are. And it is certainly not something they could do, especially not for the 200,000. The 200,000 is only the subsidy for city users. There's also county, outside of the city, and then the commercial users. So I wouldn't want council to think that just the 200,000 would get us a compost site. Having to get a site, the equipment, the manpower, the staff, and everything else that it would take. It sounds so simple that I just kind of made an assumption that parks could just do it or take that on, but it would be a more in-depth and more a whole different level. So I doubt once we dig into it that that's something council would want. And I know after talking with Todd, I realized pretty quickly that that was not really an option. So he could certainly probably answer that tonight, because I wouldn't want council to think coming into the next meeting that's a possibility, because I don't think it is, unless we want to allocate quite a bit more resources and money. And then on the chargeback administrative, I know that over the years we talk about the best way to handle that discussion. I know we have the committee that Councilman Spencer has started that is meeting again tomorrow. And at the last couple meetings it came up or had been mentioned, does administrative chargeback just overall want to be looked at? And I know that that was not a topic for whatever reason there was an interest to look at, but maybe it should. There's all sides, and how can it be done the most fairly, and is it being done the most fair? And maybe it is now, and maybe it's not, but it might be harder to do it on a whim during a budget, allocating it or saying it is or it's not. It maybe needs a little more in-depth discussion, and I'm very open to that. And I don't know if the organizational review committee is the place to do that, and maybe not, because I don't think they're interested in taking that on. But maybe there's a way, and maybe it's the administration committee, I don't know. But there might be a way to have that discussion that would actually get the information out more fairly. But just thank you.
Thank you very much. And just to reiterate to Mr. Spalding, we are perfectly fine with you taking some additional time to chat with other members of your team, and will not hold you to any, we will not make any assumption based on your silence this evening as to any of the options that were presented.
Well, we can put together a report for you all and talk about that. And if it's okay, if I could ask that this report be made next Thursday. Monday, I have an event to be at with my daughter. So if that's all right, on Thursday, would that be okay? A week from today?
That's fine with me, unless our chief adjournment officer over there from the 3rd Ward succeeds in convincing more than half of us to end this process. I think we'll be here next Thursday as well.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Thank you. Councilman Spencer.
Yeah, just for clarification though, the $201,000 is the subsidy that it costs for us to provide that service. So with the administrative fees increase to be the same as all the other enterprise funds for that consistency, that would cover the cost. I'm not saying or advocating one way or another that they take it on internally, or like I said earlier, that I would leave that up to his discretion. But the administrative fee is kind of on its own too, and that I thought I could plug a hole with that, with those funds.
And that makes sense, but that's not the cost of entirely operating a compost site. There's a lot more that goes into it. The staffing and the other items that we're just paying the current provider for the city portion.
And that's what I'm getting, that's what I'm saying, yeah.
And they're able to provide it because they have other income coming from commercial and other sources that offsets likely. They have the equipment purchased, the staff. If they were only doing city, they may not be able to function, but they're doing it as a whole, so.
But the inquiry was sort of a two option potential inquiry, right? There was
Correct.
One, to take over the operation, and 2, to essentially take over the cost.
Correct.
And I don't know if Todd started to say something when I talked.
Sorry, these are the things we have to look at. So when the community overwhelmingly supported a dedicated park sales tax, it was said very clearly that it's supposed to be used exclusively for parks and recreation. So can there be an argument that this waste could be Parks and Rec? I suppose it could. So that would be the first question we need to address. We had this conversation during the Charter Commission review some time ago. So And for our administrative fee to go up from 300,000 to over 500,000 and something, we just, we're gonna have to take a little time to look at, so.
Thank you. Any other comments on that point? Changing gears a little bit, Chief Wilde, I got a question for you. And I know that you went over this during your presentation, but can you remind us again what the senior management analyst / grants manager proposed position would be focused on and why it's important?
Well, we propose that. Right now, we have a management analyst, and primary role for that position is to do the purchasing, generate invoices, pay the bills, that sort of thing. We've taken on a lot more aggressive stance recently with grant applications, notably the body-worn camera grant. We've also gone after some state grants, and the level of difficulty in the tracking, the application itself, the tracking of the grants, and the ongoing reporting is kind of limiting us to go after more money because we just don't have the bandwidth to make it happen. When it comes to a federal grant, I'm sure if you've had any experience with those, the reporting requirements after the money is allocated is pretty substantial. We just don't have the ability to do that with one position. So we're looking at, the benefit of that position would be to increase grant funding. We're also attempting to maybe make our department a little bit more efficient through tracking of our equipment in-house. Right now, we don't have a tracking mechanism for each item that we purchase and that gets issued out to officers, and we want to be more accountable with that. So the management analyst would accept that. So really, it's just a matter of, with the amount of federal grant monies that are out there, that we could be going after for programs and projects, not just equipment. We're pretty successful when we get equipment grants, but there are DOJ grants, juvenile justice grants, for projects that we could really enhance our police response here with those sort of monies that we just don't have the bandwidth to go after right now.
Yeah, and we've had success with those applications in the past, right?
We have. We got the annual JAG grant, but that's kind of an ongoing automatic grant that we get. The ones that I'm referring to are some of the ones, like I said, when you have a Safe Streets initiative through DOJ, or if you have a juvenile justice sort of program project that you want to go after, not only do you have to develop that program to present it for funding, but you've got to track the progress. It's a very complex issue. So I see those programs and projects that we would be going after being beneficial for our community. We just don't have the ability to step it up to that next level. Where we've been most successful grant acquisition is through equipment grants, through the state of Missouri, through Office of Homeland Security, those sort of things, and those are usually in the $20,000-$30,000 range, and we've got several of those. But each one of those grants and all the reporting requirements, I got another couple grants across my desk today, and have just got to balance the fact that we can't go after the money because we don't have the level of staffing needed to really dig in and do all the tracking and reporting that's required.
Do we have experienced folks on staff currently that would be good to fill this role, or do you think we'd have to look outside?
We would have to look outside. Right now, Jordan she was an administrative assistant. She was cross-trained in the bill pay and the invoices, so she's filling the interim role. We just had our management analyst leave us in the last month for a job at the state of Missouri. She was very good, and she was able to navigate the grant acquisition process. You have to know where you're looking. It's not just writing up a application and submitting it by mail. It's all web-based, and she had cracked the code on a lot of that, which is why we were able to go after the DOJ grant for the body-worn cameras. But it's no small task to do that. So I would like to say that Jordan at some point would be able to get trained up to there, but she's doing a really good job having stepped in as an administrative assistant into the bill paying and invoicing portion of that. But we're not to that level yet.
And the role that you're requesting here, the new role, is that pay point one that you think would make us more competitive in seeking qualified applicants? And
Is that for the senior management
for the
analyst?
senior management analyst?
I haven't really looked at that and how it compares. We're comparing that to the senior management analyst position that's with Parks and Rec. I think that's the only other one that's in city government. So it's a very similar type of upper level management position that can dig in. So correct me if I'm wrong, Gail. I think there's only one other in city government, but there are other management analyst positions, or we just had the one, I think. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody else happen to have questions on that particular point? No. I would like to put that position, that senior management analyst position, and then the 3 remaining police vehicles on the parking lot. And I will not propose offsets at this point, but we'll work to find those.
And for the police vehicles, do you want that on the general fund parking lot?
For now, that's fine, yeah.
Okay.
Any other committee discussion, questions, suggestions? Councilman Spencer.
I have a quick question for Mr. Marash. In the sales tax G, and maybe Ms. Sheila could also chime in too. There's an amount for $2,442.83 for the Bicentennial Bridge. Do you know what that was actually for?
I'd have to look at the detail, I'm not sure.
That is a parks account. The Bicentennial Bridge is, I believe it's listed in the upper portion of your sales tax G account.
Yes. So that just strictly came out of the parks, not Public Works then?
Correct. It
Okay.
is funds allocated within parks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councilman Fitzwater.
I want to talk about sales tax H, but I have to reference sales tax G. I promise you I would not speak about it, but my good council member, but it's only to support my logic on sales tax H.
We'll allow it this once.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
My contention, and those that have been on council for the last, well, whatever, 3-5 years, is what we budget in our sales tax, the general sales tax, is always less than what the parks generates for the same sales tax. And obviously, the fact that we have overages in that sales tax account means that, I think we've hit those numbers and exceeded those numbers every year, that we have been really conservative, and I get that. I like the conservative part, but we have been really conservative in what we project for sales tax revenue, which we have always exceeded. The problem, as it gets to tonight, is we can only spend what the budget shows, so if we're under budgeting those dollars, it's dollars, and I get it at some point, and I don't know if we can go in and grab them year 1, year 2, year 3. I've got to rethink my whole strategy, but by under budgeting, we have built up a pool of funds, so I would hope that in sales tax H that we have a legitimate projection. I think Parks does an excellent job. They even exceed what they put in there, which is much higher than ours, which gives them the ability to spend it on Parks projects. So I have not gone back since our discussion to see. I think we are still a difference, so I hope before we finalize this that we put a legitimate, and legitimate is not an accurate word, that we make sure that we're not being so conservative that we restrict our ability to invest dollars in our community to do some of these projects, and that we put a number that we're comfortable that we can hit. So I would just make that request.
I think that's a great point. Yeah, the amount of gleaning left over is, I think, about 80% of a full projected year, isn't it? I mean, aren't we at about 5 million annually? it 5 or 5.5?
I think it's 5.
About 5.
I think so.
So we have almost 4 million left over, so, yeah, I think that's a great point. Any other comments or questions? Councilman Spencer?
So in part of that gleaning exercise, would it be fair for the departments to be able to fall in line with what we generally can communicate to the public when we pass the initial sales tax, capital improvement sales tax cycle? So like, if 70% is supposed to go to public works, 20% to public safety, 10% towards parks, take that 3.9 and base it on those percentages and see where would we be looking at for those departments that fall under capital improvements, so.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions by the committee? Any members of staff have anything that they'd like to add to the discussion? Seeing none, well, I'd like to thank everyone for, I think, a really good, wide-ranging, substantive discussion tonight. Our next meeting will be this coming Monday, August 29th at 5:30. This is one of those special 5 Monday months where we get some bonus budget meeting time. We do not have a council meeting Monday night.
Correct.
Yeah, our next council meeting will be on the first Monday of September.
Actually, it's
First Tuesday?
Tuesday
First
in
Tuesday of
September.
Right.
Monday's a holiday,
Do
so
not
it'll
come
be
here-
September 6th.
Yeah, do not come here on your Labor Day holiday. Well, thanks everyone very much. We are adjourned. I'm sorry. There's no one here to make